Deputy Tommy Broughan. 20 minutes, if you wish.
And thanks for the opportunity to speak briefly on the Industrial Relations Amendment Bill 2018, which is before us. And of course, the bill is the result of the number of events which led to the government finally promising legislation to allow Garda Síochána access to the industrial relations machinery of the state, the WRC and the Labour Court. And of course, the need for this legislation was very evident, I suppose, and ever more urgent than in November 2016, when the famous blue flu was averted at the last minute. So while the bill, of course, as other speakers have said, it is welcome effectively as a first step, I also believe, with my Sinn Féin colleagues and my Labour colleague, that Garda Síochána should have full trade union rights, and that we should have grasped that important right for such an important group of workers in our society. As always, the work of the Oireachtas Library and Research Service in producing the informative Bills Digest has been excellent, and a particular thanks, of course, is due to the Digest's author, Miss Adele McKenna, from whom I received a briefing yesterday in the library. Currently, of course, the conciliation and arbitration scheme is the main industrial relations mechanism for Garda Síochána, but according to the Digest Minister, the scheme, while it remains in place, it doesn't seem to meet very often. It's hardly met at all, I think, recently. And of course, since the events at the end of 2016, it was agreed that the Workplace Relations Commission and the Labour Court would be at long last made available to members of Garda Síochána on an informal basis until necessary legislation was published and passed, and that legislation at long last is before us. Historically, of course, Garda Síochána haven't been allowed to engage in industrial disputes, and to do so would have been seen as a breach of discipline under Regulation 5 of the 2007 Garda Síochána Discipline Regulations, Statutory Instrument 214/2007. But both the Industrial Relations Act 1990 and the Garda Síochána Act 2005, of which the Minister will remember we had a very lengthy discussion in this House, they prevent the formation of Garda trade unions and prohibit engagement with umbrella organisations such as ICTU, because they said of conflicting demands on the need for the security duties of the police, and also to protect the state's infrastructure, and at times, it was said then, I think, to police the union protests and activities of other workers. But and indeed, in other jurisdictions such as the UK, New Zealand and Australia, the rights of members of law enforcement bodies to engage in industrial action, they are restricted. But it does seem incongruous, at the very least, that the bill before us wouldn't include full recognition of the rights of the Gardaí as workers, including the right, final right, as Deputy O'Reilly has so eloquently said, to secure enforcement of the decisions of the Labour Court and the WRC, and that right is, of course, to withdraw their labour. I don't agree that any worker should be prevented from participating in collective action. I do note that there was a 2007 paper produced by Vivek Wernick, which was about strike rules in the EU 27 and beyond, and he does go through a list of countries, including Croatia, Greece, Italy, Latvia, Luxembourg, Malta, Poland, Sweden, where the police forces' rights to organise and to pursue industrial action are restricted. And obviously security roles of all of those forces are highlighted. But at the same time, this critical group of workers in our society are being denied the fundamental rights that all the rest of us regard as kind of very fundamental, essential rights. Of course, we have the four representative Garda bodies, the Garda Representative Association, GRA, the Association of Garda Sergeants and Inspectors, AGSI, the Association of Garda Superintendents, and the Association of Garda Chief Superintendents, AGCS. And of course, GRA reports it has 10,000, I think, rank-and-file members. But of course, these association ministers, they weren't invited to take part in the cross-departmental work group on industrial relations structures. I mean, they were only allowed to, as I understand, to submit written submissions. Whereas, I'd imagine it would have been preferable to have across-the-table discussions, as would be normal in industrial relations. And preceding the working group, of course, other deputies have referred to the 2012 case, the European Confederation of Police Eurocop, when they brought the case against Ireland on behalf of our Garda body to the European Committee on Social Rights. AGSI, I think, was the member of Eurocop which sparked this case, and on the premise that it is a breach of the European Social Charter to deny access to the Workplace Relations Commission and the Labour Court. And of course 2014 the Social Rights Committee ruled that Garda Association performed the same duties as trade union, but that therefore Garda didn't need to join effectively other trade unions, but that they should be allowed to join umbrella union bodies, including under Article 5, that access to pay negotiations would have restricted, and that they should be allowed to strike Article 6.4. Of course, the ruling was non-binding, but in 2016, John Horgan, previously the Labour Court Deputy Chair, led the Haddington Road Course Agreement review of Garda Síochána and found that the four Garda associations should indeed become official trade unions, and agreed with ECSR that they be allowed to join national umbrella organisations such as ICTU, but that strike action shouldn't be allowed. And the working group mentioned above, of course, was established in 2017, and its first report, of course, goes against recommendations of the ECSR and the Horgan report, Minister. But it did, however, recommend that Gardaí should be allowed access to WRC and the Labour Court, and it's these recommendations, of course, we have before us today. Now, I note, Minister, that the second report of the working group on how industrial relations will operate going forward, it was due to be completed this time last year, but it's still outstanding, so, or at least I haven't seen it. So when will we actually have that report? We can't underestimate the incredibly, I suppose, stressful and difficult work life that members of Garda Síochána have. And I noted, for example, at the recent meeting of AGSI, topics to the forefront, of course, included levels of depression and stress that Garda Síochána suffered. In fact, it was mentioned that 12 members had died by suicide between August 2017 and March 2018, and a whole range of welfare issues. And we do know, of course, there have been morale issues, because we've been constantly, as we were yesterday, I think, discussing reports and issues surrounding scandals and so on, which affected Garda Síochána in varying degrees, and the Charlton report yesterday. And it has to be remembered, I think, Minister, that a lot of the pressures on the Garda Síochána, I think, like with other workers, goes back to the savage cuts that were imposed in pay and conditions going back to 2008, this last decade. And on Taoiseach, when I was questioning him about crime levels in our society and the pressures that Garda Síochána were under, particularly at community policing level in every district of our city and in your county, all across it, he was talking constantly about 2021, 2022, when we'll have the 21,000 members and ancillary support staff. But the point is that existing staffs have had to engage with and try and deal with very serious antisocial criminal matters year after year, day after day, all during this horrendous period we went through. And when we look at the costs, we had an article recently, I think, with Mr. Stephen Collins, telling us that the blanket bank guarantee actually worked. But we know from the levels of cuts in our public services, from what's happened in housing, disasters in housing and in health, we know that the blanket guarantee, and from the 400,000 young Irish that emigrated, we know that it didn't work. And it didn't work here no more than it worked in Greece, or similar vicious tactics worked in Greece. And the point is, on Garda Síochána, and law enforcement was also impacted very seriously by this minister. So I think that's what we have to remember when we consider the entitlements that our Gardaí have. And one fundamental entitlement, I believe, should be full trade union rights and all that entails. And as I said, while we support today, as a step down that road, a further step, it does seem to me that it is something that we should be prepared to give the fundamental rights. And Deputy O'Snoddy, of course, rightly raised concerns about the work levels of the WRC and the Labour Court, and I think it's expected that there will be a 10% increase on top of the current, I suppose, backlog on claims sent into the court, WRC and the court, perhaps an additional 1,500 claims, but the representative bodies, AGSI and the others, say that this is actually a conservative estimate of what the conciliation service will have to face. You also mentioned, I think, Minister, that the legislation will commence following the establishment of internal procedures, and that referrals can be only sent on to WRC in Labour Court once those procedures are dealt with. So you might come back on that. I mean, what are we talking about here? What are these additional internal procedures? Perhaps the Department and the Garda Síochána have discussed this, but I mean, it's something that we're not, I don't think, aware of. So the short bill before us amends Section 3 and 23 of the Industrial Relations Act 1990, and the amendment to Section 3, of course, adds the definition of the 1990 Act, and the list of types of workers in Section 23 of the 1990 Act will now include members of the Garda Síochána as workers. Of course, it excludes the Garda Commissioner and the members of the Garda Reserve. Again, debatable issues, I suppose. Section 4 of the bill inserts a sixth schedule to the 1990 Act, and of course the GRA is not satisfied with this bill because it doesn't extend the right to industrial action, and it also to classify themselves as a full trade union. So I do welcome the bill as a step forward. I think the access, I think I was the first deputy who brought in a far-ranging, on behalf of the trade union movement, trade union recognition bill into this House almost 20 years ago, because I believe profoundly in the right of every worker. It was Ryanair then, actually, that we were campaigning to allow trade union recognition, and of course I congratulate the trade union movement that at long last trade union recognition has been achieved in that company, and the Minister knows aviation business, the aviation business and the aviation area very well, but I believe the Gardaí should have similar rights. That's the bottom line. Thanks, Cathaoirleach.